Redditors who have left your fiancé at the altar, why did you do it and what happened? A buddy of mine did this, and we were his accomplice. Holy crap, I can't believe this happened 12 years ago. Anyway, a buddy of ours was going to marry this girl he had known for a few years. He was expressing doubt, but racked it up to being nervous about marriage. The night before he broke down crying and thought he was making a mistake. We offered support and told him it would be okay. We said that if he didn't want to do it, he didn't have to, but we encouraged him to go through with it. Day of the wedding and everything is happening. The wedding has started and he is at the altar waiting. I don't know about other religions, but Mexican Catholic weddings have this moment before the bride comes out where it's quiet with anticipation and everything is just waiting. My buddy is sweating like a madman. My other friends and I notice and think he is about to pass out. Then it happens. The groom starts rocking back and forth. He looks like he is about to faint, and he slowly starts side shuffling. My buddies look at each other and just know what is about to happen. The groom turns to his right and starts heading to the side door. Some people in the church notice and there is a gasp. He beelines to the door and goes outside. Me and my buddies follow him. At this point I just thought he needed air. Nope. He heads straight towards the sports car he had rented. We yell at him, and he yells at us to get in and we do. He turns the car on and starts making his way out of the parking lot as the people in the church start to come out and yell. He takes off. We are yelling and screaming in the car, and he has this dead serious look on his face. We end up in Vegas for the next few days. His phone is blowing up, but he never answers it. The dude ends up joining the military and leaves to boot camp just 2 weeks after all of that happened. He stayed with us couch surfing for 2 weeks and disappeared from his bride, her family, and even his. Last I heard of him, he had served multiple tours overseas and was part of a recon unit. Haven't heard anything else from him for a few years now. None of us have actually. The bride was devastated of course, but last I heard she got married for reals this time and is very happy in her new relationship. A guy I knew did this. He was a nice, laid-back guy marrying a toxic person. I can't get into the details because I didn't know him too well, but apparently his friends had been telling him to break it off from the beginning. They had a final intervention for him the morning of the wedding and they finally convinced him to just leave. He showed up at this festival I was at during what was supposed to be his wedding. I saw him and said, "Hey man, aren't you getting married today?" And he had this kind of far away look and said, "Yeah, that's not happening anymore." My mum thought she had been left at the altar by not only my dad, but the minister as well. She hated being the center of attention and didn't look up from the ground until she was almost down the aisle. When she did, there was nobody waiting for her. Just then the door behind the altar flew open and my dad ran out with his kilt flapping around him, followed by the minister. Apparently they had been drinking whiskey in the minister's office and hadn't realized the ceremony had started. This is maybe the most Scottish story I've ever heard. I got left at the altar. He had spent the previous day spending a lot of time with his ex instead of helping me set up. I yelled at him about it because he was late and hadn't helped at all. He said he didn't want to get married because spending time with his ex made him realize I wasn't as fun as she was because I was uncomfortable with him doing drugs. Kicked him out and still had the party. I told him to use that time to go home and pack up all his stuff. He did. Then he got into crack and other crap, so yay. Eater. So yeah, I don't really understand why I have to clarify that I'm not excited that my ex got into crack, but apparently I do. The yay was more of an unenthusiastic, sarcastic remark. I didn't feel comfortable with him doing it every day. He thought I was a bus. We broke up. He got into crack. Not a good time for anyone. Last I heard, he's clean. Yay. And I actually mean at that time. Who knows if he still does any of that, but he's off the hard medications, or so I've heard, and has gotten his life mostly on track. Still don't want to be with him ever again, but I'm happy for him. I'm not a monster who wishes addiction on people. Not at the altar, but I bailed just 2 days before we were headed to City Hall. It was a green card marriage. On our second date she mentioned that her visa was expiring in 6 months, and I jokingly proposed to her. We continued dating, were falling for each other, and that proposal became much more real as a deadline approached. I backed out at the last minute because we just didn't agree on a few details. Living arrangements and finances were easy. What couldn't be negotiated was how seriously either of us wanted to take those vows. I wanted to at least attempt to be a married, monogamous couple. She didn't really want to commit to that. If she falls deeper in love, great. If not, we are just roommates. I miss her, but I think I dodged a bullet. I believe she would have vanished on me at some point, and I could be in a real jam over immigration crime. Wasn't me personally, but if anyone here has any objection, speak now or forever hold your peace. Woman in the back stands up and says the groom can't get married as he is my husband. Turns out the woman who objected and the groom were in fact married and tried to get divorced, but the divorce was never completed. So technically the groom was still married and the wedding did not proceed. I'm just trying to work out who invited her. I left my ex-fiancée a month before the wedding. Backstory: I never actually proposed to her. She more or less did it to me. We were in a mall and she wanted to go to a jewelry store to look at engagement rings. I wasn't expecting to walk out of there with one, but we did. The salesperson even took a just engaged Polaroid. She became more and more controlling, and I couldn't take it anymore. After I left her, her friend texted me on the day of the supposed ceremony telling me the cake was delicious. My ex somehow managed to break into my email and ask me who a girl was in an email I received after I left her. I could understand her reasoning if it was before, but it wasn't. She also texted me a while after I left and told me she missed her period. An hour later, I got another text that said, "Never mind. I'm pretty sure I dodged a bullet by leaving." During rehearsal, my now husband and I didn't actually rehearse our ceremony, but kind of just talked logistics with our bridal party. As a result, when our ceremony was over, we didn't really know how to officially end it. So we just kinda stood there awkwardly for a few seconds until he whispered to me, "So are you just going to leave now?" Meaning that I was supposed to lead our exit. I, however, took it literally and just started walking. He claims that I ran away. I got about 10 to 15 feet away before he called out after me, "Wait, I think you're supposed to take me with you." It was very embarrassing, but apparently everyone found it hilarious and started laughing. I will never live that down. I'm her husband, can confirm. She will never live it down. Not quite at the altar, but I was left several weeks before my wedding. And by left, I mean my fiancé insisted he was stressed out with work and needed some time. When in reality he wanted to move his new pregnant girlfriend into our house while I was out of town. So, the initial aftermath was indescribable. Frankly, about 85% of our wedding was set up. Calling and explaining this to vendors was a total blast. I lived in and was getting married in the South. So if I never hear "Oh bless your heart" again, it'll be too soon. Not to mention the crippling depression I fell into and loss of a whole life I had built with someone I had trusted. I didn't leave my parents' house for over a month afterward. I also had to deal with my family and his and our friends, since he felt no reason to explain this to his side or anyone else, and just assumed I'd do it or they'd figure it out. To say it was a disaster is a huge understatement. I'm still recovering, mostly financially, but therapy has done wonders. My ex has a lot of mental issues and hid them well, and I've gotten to a place where I know I'm better off and dodged a huge bullet. I also recently started seeing a man who makes my heart race when he walks into a room. It's a beautiful thing. I dated a guy for 5 years and things were going well enough. When we were both approaching 30, I really wanted to get married and start a family, but he felt he wasn't ready. Somehow his family talked him into proposing, and when he did, he said, "Well, I suppose we should get married next summer." That's it. When I later asked if he was going to get me a ring, he said, "Why? You already said yes." The whole planning process was like pulling teeth. He didn't want any part in it, and I was not only paying for pretty much everything, I was also choosing all the vendors, decorations, music, etc. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, addressing all the wedding invitations by myself. When he came in, picked one up and said, "Huh, those look kinda cheap," and walked out. I had made them myself to save some money, and he had never even seen them before. I cried, finished up addressing the letters, mailed them the next morning, and left him a few days later because I felt that I deserved someone who was excited to get married to me. I had been worried about how our friends and family would react, but really, everyone was totally understanding and sweet about it. My grandma just said, "Oh, these things happen." His uncle told me I was engaged once, but then she ran away and became a nun. At least she left me for Jesus. Seriously, no one gave me a hard time about it at all. Even the vendors were very supportive. As for my then fiancé, he was sad and cried, but ultimately, I think he was relieved that he didn't have to get married. All in all, he wasn't a bad guy. On the contrary, he was a total sweetheart, but the thought of settling down and taking on responsibility scared him to death somehow. Well, all this was 5 years ago. He's been single ever since, and I'm in the middle of planning a wedding again. This time, my fiancé is involved in every step of the process. He's talked to bakeries and seen more possible venues than I have. He tells me he can't wait to be my husband, and watching him practice his new signature does certain things to my heart. I have never regretted calling off the other wedding, because this is how getting married should be like. My dad actually jilted his fiancée. My dad was fairly young and was arranged to marry someone that was supposed to be the most beautiful girl in the area. He worked on offshore rigs, so he did not have any contact with the girl, with the exception of a few photos and a couple of long distance phone calls, which were really expensive. When he got home, she came to visit, and he realized that she was far heavier than what they showed in the pictures. When he pointed this out, no one seemed to think it was a big deal, but my dad was pretty unhappy. He went as far as talking to the girl and the girl's parents, asking them to respectfully call it off, but they were adamant about going through with the wedding. It was during that conversation that the family admitted that the girl was illiterate. She wasn't interested in school, so they took her out early and sent her to study tailoring instead. She had not even learned how to handle money or read and write. My dad didn't want to embarrass the girl or her family, so he didn't tell anyone about what he learned. Everyone had assumed that she had college-level education, but she actually went to a vocational school that was housed in the college building. A few nights before the wedding, my father's cousin, a friend, and his younger brother helped him escape. Another person volunteered to marry the girl, so she still got married on the day, so it all went well. I think this just nearly happened to me or not, it's very confusing. My partner and I have been together 5 years. During this time we talked about getting married. Actually, he did something amazing one day which made me realize my search was over. So I jumped the gun a bit and asked him if he would be up for marrying one day, and he said yes. Other times we've talked about it, he's always said it's on the cards. I don't want to nag the poor guy, but after 4 or 5 years you do get to wondering. I never knew there was a problem. Well, there's a problem. It seems he doesn't remember any of those conversations. He doesn't believe in marriage. He's never believed in marriage ever, and I don't know. I just felt something go snap in my heart. So I love him, so I stay, but I cry every other night. I don't know why marriage is important to me, but it just is. Always has been. He's always known this too. I try not to let him know, because it just causes arguments. Once when it got too much I tried to leave, but he does this emotional blackmail thing, where he says he's going to leave his very decent job and go and work in a war zone. Phones up his family, all sorts of crap. So I can't leave. I guess you can get jilted at the altar without actually being near one. I also know someone who went through with the wedding, but then just didn't sign the papers because everyone was already coming and they were breaking up amicably. All the money had been spent and everyone was already on their way, so they explained to the person officiating the wedding, cut out their personal vows, and just didn't sign the papers. No one even knew that the wedding was a fake until they sent out a notice on the wedding website. They still sent thank you cards and returned all the gifts. It was surprisingly undramatic.